Hi, welcome back. So in our last video, we made these Christmas tree napkins, and now we have the same fabrics to make the coordinating table runner. What we ended up with is we have three different color families. We have the neutrals, the greens, and the reds. Two side setting triangles. This is an 11.5-inch square cut in half on the diagonal, and then two 2x48-inch strips. The neutral is going to be our background. So we need 18 squares of neutral and then 9 each of red and green. On the neutral, I've went ahead and drawn a line from corner to corner diagonally on each back. So we take one of the red or green, one of the neutral, and we sandwich them together, right sides together. We're going to make half square triangles. So we're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the line up one side and a 1/4 inch from the line down the other side. And we're going to have to do this 18 times. I'm going to give this a quick press. And we're going to take our rotary cutter and we're going to cut on this line. Now we have two matching half square triangles. So I'm going to go off camera and do the rest of these and I'll be back. Alright, hi, I'm back. We finally finished all these half square triangles. When you have a pattern like this, where you have an illusion of curve or something like that, it's important that your pieces stay in order. You lay them out and then you stack them in the order. And then there's a special way to sew these together so that they stay in order. We're going to pick up 1 and 2. And we'll sew these together. And then we'll leave them on the machine and pick up the next 2. And we'll sew these together. Don't break thread, we're going to chain piece. Now we're going to leave all these together. We're just going to open them like a book. And you can see your pattern starting. So you pick up the next one. And then do the same thing again for column 4, go all the way to column 12 like this. At the end, we'll be able to just flip these over and sew this seam. And then we'll flip these over and sew this seam. And the benefit to doing it like this, even if it does get a little bit awkward to handle, is that if something gets out of order, you'll be able to see your pattern getting off right away rather than sewing a long row and finding out when you have to rip everything out. I'm going to finish this off camera and I'll be back shortly. We now have all our rows sewn together and I just wanted to show you how everything's coming along. Everything's stuck together right where it needs to go. The only seams you have to align are the seams in the columns. And this method makes it very easy. All you have to do is start at the beginning. Alright, so we've got all this sewn together now. It still needs to be pressed. I realize it's still lumpy. I've got one of the side borders sewn on. We're going to put the other one on, and then we're going to put the end triangles on. And then it's time to baste and quilt this thing. I don't usually use pins. I just kind of sew it together. Breathe, Melissa. Breathe, Melissa. Breathe. I don't want to do CPR time. Obviously, it's too long. I usually leave it too long because it's easier to trim it than to stretch it. So I just cut a strip that's way too long, although it should be 48 inches. And then I trim it down to size. Okay. Now it's time for these. These are the end triangles. Just gonna use my fingernail and press the side seams down a little bit to make this easier. Word of warning, you want to be a little bit careful with this edge. Its bias, it will stretch out of shape, really just because you looked at it. Now the end triangles are on. It's time to press this thing and then baste it and quilt it. See you soon. We're going to spray baste this. Got this brand. Doesn't really matter what brand you use. They're all the same. I've used 505. I've used Walmart's generic. I've used Joann's generic. They're all the same. I started it a little bit up here just to hold it together. What you do is you spray your backing. You smooth down your batting. You want to work in small areas at a time so that you don't end up with wads and tucks. Then you spray the batting and smooth down the top. When you do this, it's going to come through the top, it's going to come through the fabric a little bit. You'll end up with sticky hands. Don't bother with soap and water. You want baby oil. Gets it all off, and then you use soap and water to get the baby oil off your hands. But if you try to get this off with soap and water, you may just actually scrub until your fingers are raw and they're still sticky. You can also baste with safety pins. I can show you how to do that in a later video, but this is my preference. I like to spray baste. Glue it all together. And then when your finger gets a little sticky, the nozzle comes out. Or it could just mean that I'm messy. Some of these can be a little bit strong smelling, and if you have asthma or allergies, you may want to do this outside or with the window open. It doesn't really bother me. Now you want to let that dry. You don't have to let it dry for long. I usually just let it dry long enough to wash my hands. Be right back. Now we're ready to quilt. Off camera, I had to change some of my machine settings. I changed to a red thread because I think that would look better than the silver. Also, I put in a heavier gauge needle. We're now working with an 18 gauge needle. For piecing, I just used an 11, which makes everything nice and smooth, but if you try to do free motion quilting with an 11 gauge needle, your thread breaks over and over and over. Ask me how I know. The next thing we need to do is drop the feed dogs. If you can't drop the feed dogs on your machine, then there's a product called a Supreme Slider that will cover them so that you can then do free motion quilting. You can start anywhere. Some people start in the middle. I usually start in the middle, but for this project, I'm going to start at one end and work to the other. So find your starting point, and the first thing you want to do is pull both ends of your thread, both the bobbin and the top thread, up through the quilt. And we're going to go in swirls. Make a few stitches and cut your tails. If you cut your tails too soon, then you have to rethread your machine. But if you try to leave them in, what's going to happen is the thread's going to get everywhere and it knots up. I guess I have to cook something.